Death at a Halloween Horror Park. Written and performed by Tony Capobianco. Her heart racing, Bridget ran through the slasher scare house, screaming, "Help me! Help me! For the love of God, somebody help me! He's going to kill me!" Bridget was a young scare actor playing the role of the scantily clad, bloody victim. This particular scare house heavily used black lights and strobe lights. Animatronic supernatural killers wielding sharp weapons were strategically placed throughout the maze to optimize the screams. Various scare actors dressed as sadistic slashers jumped out of secret passages. The patrons of the slasher house smiled and laughed as the pretty 19-year-old girl frantically yelled for help. A few people even said, "Wow, she's really good. She could be the next Scream Queen in a horror movie." A large man dressed as a demonic clown manhandled Bridget and threw her into the room that was decorated with severed body parts and bloody corpses. She crashed to the floor. The deranged maniac clown methodically walked toward her as she stumbled back up to her feet. The young girl looked like she was genuinely terrified. The strobe light caused her panicked brown eyes to resemble a deer caught in headlights. With a long knife in his left hand, the hideous clown swung the blade and slit her throat. Blood sprayed onto an animatronic undead killer. The crowd in the scare maze erupted in applause. One guest said, "Dang, that stuff was tight. It looks so authentic. That gets 5 stars. This is the best scare park that I've ever been to." Unbeknownst to the folks in attendance, it looked real because it was real. They had just witnessed a real murder. The young lady that worked at the scare park had run up to them and pleaded for their help, and they all just laughed at her. When they would finally learn the truth of that night, that bloody scene and their inaction would haunt them for years to come. The man wearing an inhuman clown mask had left Bridget's dead body in the splatter room. Hours passed as everyone assumed that the real murder victim was nothing but one prop among many. The people can't be blamed for their inaction. Had you been in their place, you very likely would have acted just as they did. This haunted scare park isn't like some of the popular scare attractions that you may have visited. This was Netherworld Gate. One thing that set Netherworld Gate apart from other Halloween scare parks is its unprecedented attention to detail. The theming of each scare house and of all its outdoor attractions was legendary. Once you walked into the park, it wasn't so much that you felt like you had walked onto a movie set, but that you had walked into other real worlds. The bloodthirsty killer, well aware of these facts, chose Netherworld Gate to be the location of his murder spree. Though he had killed Bridget, his lust for blood hadn't yet been quenched. He hunted for his next victim, and when he found her, he stalked her. Being a Friday night, the Scream Park was bustling with large crowds. Among the crowd were 2 beautiful young girls named Jossie and Erica. The 2 best friends loved scare parks, Halloween, and all things horror. Erica had dressed up as a vampire hunter, and Jossie had dressed up as a zombie princess. They had been looking forward to this night since July. Now that the night had arrived, they were absolutely giddy. The first scare house that they visited was Dracula's Castle. The classic monsters were their favorites, and Dracula's Castle had a reputation for being one of the best scare houses in the world. Fog billowed out from the gate to the castle as they walked through it. Through the gate, a Gothic courtyard awaited them. A horse and black carriage was parked by the grand door of the castle. The horse was black with red eyes, and the enclosed carriage had a coffin within it. Large statues of hooded noblemen carried torches which lit the courtyard. Inside Dracula's castle, a red and gold rug covered the floor. The entrance room was large. The sound of a baby crying in another room could be heard. A realistic animatronic Dracula greeted them as they left the gathering room and entered the hallway. A ghoulish figure played the organ as the girls walked down the hall. Skeletons with fangs lined the walls. Candles and blacklights lit the way. The girls really felt like they had entered Dracula's castle. It was almost perfect. Entering into a room with coffins, they noticed that some of the coffins were open but empty. A demonic-looking clown sat up in a coffin and leered at them. The brides of Dracula stood around the room. The girls were unsure which, if any of the female vampires were scare actors. The details on the props made it nearly impossible to tell the difference. In fact, the details were so good that to call them props seemed like a disservice. These were genuine works of art. One of the vampire brides, wearing a white dress, faced the corner of the room. Just as Erica expected the figure in the corner to turn around, she heard a hiss as a white hand appeared before her face. It was one of the motionless vampire brides. She wasn't an inanimate figure. She was real, and her bloody vampire fangs were only inches from her face. Erica had screamed and jumped 3 feet back. Erica ran her left hand through her long black hair and said, "Dracula's castle was even better than I imagined. The scare actors got me good several times. My only complaint was that weird dude in a monstrous clown mask. I mean, what was up with that? Every detail in that castle was perfect, and the theming was extraordinary. Why was there a clown there? He didn't fit in with the other scare actors or the theming." Jossie's blue eyes grew wide as she replied, "Oh my god, right? That didn't make any sense. The guy was creepy, and the mask was actually awesome, but it didn't fit in there. Maybe he saw you earlier, and he just had to get a closer look at how stunning you are." Erica rolled her eyes and said, "Jossie, just stop. Maybe he was stalking you. He probably prefers blondes." The two girls laughed and continued walking. Next up was the Demented Clown Zone. It was an outdoor carnival that contained a merry-go-round, booths, and a big top tent. This outdoor haunt was so large that the girls almost forgot that they weren't at the state fair. Hordes of maniac clowns popped up here and there. Some of the clowns wore makeup, but it was the clowns who wore masks that were the most deeply unsettling. The masks were of the quality seen in movies. The girls looked at the merry-go-round, and they stopped dead in their tracks. It was the same demonic clown that they had seen rising from a coffin in Dracula's castle. He was standing on the merry-go-round, staring at them. Erica put her hand on Jossie's shoulder and said, "I think he really likes you." Jossie raised her eyebrows and said, "What's not to like?" The girls laughed and walked towards the big top tent. As Jossie looked over her shoulder, she noticed that the demented clown was walking toward them. He was carrying a large knife. Jossie pinched Erica's arm, pointed toward the clown that was following them, and said, "Hey, Erica, you know what? I'm not really in the mood for a carnival after all. Why don't we go check out the Hell's Gate scare house instead?" Erica nodded her head and said, "Yeah, evil clowns are so 5 years ago anyway." Erica and Jossie arrived at a huge cave. A red glowing light illuminated the fog which billowed out from the cave's entrance. Engraved in the rock on top of the entrance were the words, "Abandon all hope, ye who enter here." They walked through Hell's Mouth and entered. Moaning filled the cave. The echoes of the terrible moans and screams added to the realism. Ghastly ghouls and skeletons were hidden around the turns. Deeper into the cave, they saw gruesome depictions of torture. There were bodies that were being skinned alive, people in cages dangling above fire, demons gnawing on people, and people being boiled in cauldrons. A siren blared as they approached the devil himself. The devil was red-skinned with cloven-hoofed feet, a whip-like tail, yellow eyes, and 2 large horns on his head. His mouth was large and filled with sharp teeth. As they approached him, he said, "I have been expecting you. A special place has been prepared just for you. Your eternal suffering is only just beginning. I have such wonderful pain to show you. Go ahead, see your forever home." After hearing those terrible words, the girls came to a room. It was completely dark. A horrific shriek made them jump. Red lights then turned on and revealed that they were trapped. There was no exit to the room. Several demons, along with damned human souls, accompanied them in the enclosed room. Voices repeatedly whispered, "Welcome to your forever home." Several minutes later, the wall opened and the path continued. While the path was narrow, there were large caverns on either side. Grotesque beasts inhabited the caverns. Erica and Jossie were holding each other's hands to give each other reassurance. This scare house was quite possibly the scariest of all. Erica squeezed Jossie's hand. Jossie looked at Erica and noticed that her jaw had dropped as her eyes seemed to have doubled in size. The demonic clown was running through the fog and lunged at Erica with his big knife. He plunged it deep into her stomach and lifted her up off of the ground as gravity drove the knife deeper. The demented killer clown kept Erica impaled on his knife for several seconds, and as he did so, he tilted his head. It was as if he was trying to get the best view of his evil work. Jossie screamed and ran out of the cave. She ran up to people and yelled, "He killed my best friend! A killer clown killed Erica!" Once again, everyone thought that it was all part of the show. Jossie ran, and as she looked over her shoulder, she saw that the psycho killer clown was racing after her. The maniac in the mask chased her right into another outside scare area. It was the haunted crypt. This cemetery resembled the classic New Orleans-style cemeteries. Fog covered the ground just as it did in the classic monster movies. Unfortunately for Jossie, this wasn't a movie. This was real. Jossie hid inside one of the crypts. The killer in the clown mask slowed down, but walked on past her hiding place. She was breathing heavily as her body trembled. The clown suddenly lurched through the door of the crypt. He lunged at Jossie, but Jossie dove out of the way. She quickly sprung to her feet and ran out of the crypt. As she ran, an animatronic ghost dropped right in front of her. She must have set off the motion sensor. There's no way that the killer clown hadn't heard the sound. A crypt to the side caught Jossie's attention as she ran past the ghost. The crypt had an open coffin. She pulled herself up and through the window. She then got into the coffin, pulled down the lid, and closed herself in. She breathed quietly and even used her hand to cover her mouth. The maniac in the demonic-looking clown mask almost walked by the crypt where Jossie was hiding, but something caught his eye. White and red makeup was smeared on the window to the crypt. Jossie had been dressed up as a zombie princess, and all of the sweat and running must have caused the makeup to run. The killer kicked in the door to the crypt. Breathing heavily through his mask, he slowly walked around the room. He checked to see if she had put on the clothes of the Grim Reaper that was standing in the back corner. He then checked to see if she was hiding behind a black curtain. Next, he methodically walked towards the coffin, and he violently yanked open the lid and said, "Trick or treat." Raising his left hand high toward the ceiling, Jossie screamed. Then he ferociously drove his big knife into Jossie's chest. Her blood splattered across the demonic clown mask. Satisfied with himself, he pulled out his knife, licked it, and gazed at the carnage that he had inflicted. A clanking sound was heard as his knife dropped to the floor of the crypt. The clown breathed heavily and staggered backwards against the wall. The massive wound made by the clown's knife closed up before his eyes. Jossie sat up with her arms folded across her chest, flashed a pair of pointy fangs, and said, "My turn." Leaping out from the coffin, Jossie jumped on top of him and bit into his throat. She sucked up his blood like a milkshake through a straw. Excuse me, were you not going to share with your little old best friend?" said Erica as she stood in the doorway with her fangs extended. Pausing from feeding for a moment, Jossie ran her right hand back through her long silky blonde hair and said, "Tonight was fun! We should totally do this again. Drinks on me!" With a wickedly fun smile on her face, Erica proceeded towards the man who had tried to kill her earlier that night. While Jossie fed from the killer clown's neck, Erica sank her teeth into the artery that pulsated on his inner elbow. The beautiful vampire girls drank his blood until he ran dry. I hope that you enjoyed your stay here at the haunted Half Moon Inn. The Master requests that you consider supporting me and the inn by becoming a slave. A patron of mine on Patreon. The Half Moon Inn needs your support to keep the doors open. You wouldn't want the residents here to feel forgotten and abandoned, would you? Creating quality scary stories to share with you is very important to me. Running this inn of horror is a passion of mine, and I would truly appreciate your support. The world is hurting. It needs more horror. Help me to heal the world through horror. Together, with your help, we could haunt this world one home at a time. Until next time, always remember, just because you don't see them doesn't mean that they aren't there.